Good afternoon, everybody. I am Paul Church. I am the Managing Director of Interquest. We're a tech, digital, data recruitment business. Welcome to episode 16. So that's 16 weeks of our webinar series aimed at our community of HR, staffing, and talent professionals. So today I'm back at home, and those who are kind of tuning in each week will see that usually I've been in the office, but I've given in. I've accepted that really for the next month or so, at least 100% work from home is what I feel we should be doing, unless, of course, extenuating circumstances over the next month. So instead of the backdrop of the London sirens, you will instead be hearing Brighton seagulls, maybe my cat meowing or jumping on me or something like that. So as I was just saying, Saturday's news came as a big shock to me, at least how sudden it all was. And now we find ourselves back into a form of lockdown. So I guess the webinar is very much here to stay. So I guess that's worked out for me in this series because it's not the end of webinars just yet. We have 540 members in the group as it stands. We're booked up now each week until the 9th of December. After that, I'm going to regroup, get our new speakers lined up for 2021 and kick back off with a new offering in 2021. Over the last few weeks as well, a few of the viewers have been kind enough to write some posts on LinkedIn about how much they've enjoyed these webinars. I did not ask them to do it. They did it out off their own back, which was really nice, but it meant a lot to me. And I actually thought I would ask, if you do enjoy the webinar today, just stick a post on LinkedIn, put a mention for us. If you don't enjoy it, then feel free not to write anything whatsoever. A few weeks ago, we had a great discussion around the role of HR, which has risen to even more prominence and important in 2020. Today, we discussed talent acquisition, which has had maybe a slightly rockier year. And like recruiters, talent acquisition were hit quite hard in Q2, and a lot of good people ended up in the market. So I'm just letting someone else in there. There we go. But the role of talent acquisition is of incredible importance. And I believe, and I'm sure our speakers do, that it will become even more important than it was to the DNA of any business as we go into 2021 and the years that follow. The role will evolve, though, and that is partly what we're going to discuss today. So, of course, I've recruited two fantastic speakers today. The first one we've got here is Martin Warner. Martin is the Director of Talent and People for Smart Pension. Martin has, having already helped Smart scale from 80 people to just over 400 people in the past 2 years, he is now responsible for Smart's next growth phase, whilst ensuring that Smart retains its key principles and culture. Martin helped Smart get into the Great Places to Work list for 2020, as well as being part of the team that set up their nearshoe engineering hubs in Poland, Belarus and Croatia. Prior to joining Smart, he was a consultant for 3 years, helping to scale companies such as Market Finance and TransferWise. So Martin, thanks for joining us today. How is everything? And I suppose, how excited are you to talk about this topic?
Yeah, good afternoon, Paul. Good afternoon, everybody. How am I? Very well, like everybody else, sat at home, I suspect. Like you, Paul, I've been going into the office really since the end of July, sort of a couple of days a week, just to give myself a break from the four walls that I've been staring at for what seems like an age now, actually. But yeah, look, a lot has happened in 2020, and particularly for talent acquisition. So very, very pleased to be on the call, and yeah, really excited actually to have a conversation and go through some of the questions that I'm sure people are going to ask.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining us, Martin.
No worries.
And our second guest today is Jason Waterman, who is the Director of Talent at 11FS. So Jason has over 12 years of recruitment, talent acquisition and people experience, specializing in team builds and workplace culture development, primarily with start and scale ups and hyper growth businesses. Currently the head of talent at 11FS, overseeing all talent acquisition and development. Jason led the growth of 11FS to 200 and is currently implementing a career progression framework. Jason previously headed up the venture talent team at BCG Digital Ventures, part of the Boston Consulting Group, building the founding teams for 19 startups, including VC-backed businesses like Machine Max, Heycar, and Wonderbill. So, Jason, thanks for joining us today. How are you? And yeah, how you feel about our topic of today?
Oh yeah, thanks for having me. Very excited, to be honest. I think it's something that's obviously incredibly close to my heart, given that it's been what I've been doing for, as you say, 12 years. So it's an exciting topic, and I think there's lots to talk about because it has changed so dramatically over time, but quite specifically in the last 8 or 9 months as well. So it's a really interesting topic. So thanks for having me.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jason. So everybody in the audience, so if you're happy to turn your cameras on just so it feels like we're in a real room, that'd be great. If not, that's no problem at all. But look, hopefully we're going to get plenty of questions today. Feel free to put your hand up on the on the Zoom thing today. If you want to ask a question yourself, and I encourage that, interactive as possible. If you'd rather just pop something in the chat and I'll ask it for you, please do. Do it as it comes up. Don't wait to the end. Do it as it comes up. I'm happy to fire the new questions out. But that being said, let's kick off. So Jason, let's start with yourself. So for you, what have been the biggest changes for talent acquisition in 2020?
Where do I start? It's obviously been a pretty rocky year for most teams. So I think if I look at the specific example of 11FS, the huge changes for us have been kind of personnel and then volume of work. So the volume has obviously decreased massively. So we went from being right in the midst of hyper growth and recruiting and having 20, sometimes more people start a month to kind of the total opposite of that. So I think it's really been a challenge for the TA team at 11FS to be able to switch from spending all day speaking to candidates and attending interviews and the kind of processes that go with it, and having to switch to a slightly more internally focused way of doing things. So getting involved in HR projects or resourcing and staffing to ensure that everyone that we had in the business was working on something and then also felt kind of well looked after. So I think the big changes from a ways of working is that we've had to start to think about doing different things. And I think that kind of is something that we'll probably talk about in a bit more detail, but I suspect a lot of people have seen across the industry that it's no longer enough to be able to just actively go out and find candidates and do that initial identification and acquisition piece. It's now a little bit more about going further into that life cycle that an employee has, whether it's onboarding or well-being pieces and everything around that. So I think it's been quite a shift from a really obvious standpoint of the way that COVID's affected businesses, but then also it's been a really interesting shift on people's priorities and what they do on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jason. Martin, what do you think?
Yeah, it's been a very interesting time for the team at Smart, but probably for the different reasons to the team that Jason looks after, because we have been in strong growth phase this year. So we've had, correctly, I think just over 200 people hired this year. In fact, we had 25 starters on Monday this week alone. So we've actually had it the other way around, where, as Jason rightly says, COVID has changed so many things over the past sort of 7 or 8 months. And actually what we found, some of the difficulties or challenges that we've had is, actually trying to entice people to leave their current companies where they may have been for 2 or 3 years and where they feel very comfortable. And obviously this is a very difficult time for a lot of people, and people are quite skeptical and quite reticent to want to change jobs at this point in time. They absolutely don't want to be sort of last in and first out if anything goes wrong with another company that they're joining. So some of the challenges that we faced have been around, like I said, enticing people to actually join Smart and leave their current companies. And then on the flip side to that, because we have been advertising so many roles, there have also been roles where we've just had monumental amounts of applications for them, and going through those and trying to deliver a good candidate experience, which I think is something else we're going to come on to later. So I'll leave it there. But those really have been the challenges for us, in terms of actually ensuring that we can get the right levels of talent and the right talent itself, to go through a growth phase at a time when it is a very difficult situation for everybody involved. And certainly when we've seen the number of requests for remote working start to take steps up as people get more used to working from home, as we're all doing, then, people's views on what they want from their next opportunity and what type of company they're looking for are also just starting to change now after sort of 7 or 8 months. So that's also making it quite difficult for the talent acquisition team at Smart to be able to, land the candidates that we want to and that we need in order to continue the growth.
Absolutely. Thanks, Martin. And Jason, if I go back to you, because you kind of alluded to this in your opening question. So as I mentioned in Q2, a lot of talent acquisition professionals lost their jobs due to COVID-19, as did recruiters. I suppose, what impact do you think that's had on the role itself? And I suppose is this industry in need of rebuilding, and how is that going to happen, do you think?
Yes, it's an interesting question. I think a lot of the people that I've spoken to on kind of both sides of the fence, whether they're current kind of TA or internal, or if they're agency recruiters. I think there's still a huge interest in working in that talent acquisition side of things. I think naturally quite a lot of people that are perhaps agency are now starting to consider talent acquisition and internal roles that perhaps they weren't in the past. And I think that in itself will ensure that the teams that are still in place and growing and come out of the other side of COVID actually have a really, really strong pool of candidates to pick from. I think, we will be able to have a deeper pool of candidates that have a much broader knowledge base as well. So I think it obviously needs some rebuilding from a confidence level, but I have personally great confidence in the fact that there's still lots of really, really good people either in jobs or in the market. And I hope, obviously, goes without saying that people are able to find jobs, but I think there will be more and more great candidates. And once the world starts to get back to normal, then I think there'll be lots and lots of opportunities, because the kind of cost savings of having really strong teams in place have been really, really clear and evident in this period of time where companies have had to make redundancies and think about all of their parties and their costs, and having, really strong talent teams in place that can save, I guess in Martin's case, potentially hundreds of thousands of pounds. That's massive in a time where companies have to watch every single penny that goes out the door. So whilst there is a rebuilding piece that will probably happen, this quarter and next, I think there's actually still lots of really, really strong talent. So my hope is that continues, and that people still want to look at these types of roles as well.
Absolutely. What do you think, Martin?
Yeah, as Jason rightly says, look, it's been a hugely challenging time, and a lot of people have rightly, as you've rightly said, have lost their roles, which is devastating, I know, and puts a lot of pressure on individuals. But I genuinely think that we will obviously come through COVID in one way or another, of course, and the market will pick up. And I think there's opportunities that are going to arise for both in-house and for agency recruiters, because as we come through this period and jobs start to change, and we've seen a number of sort of different job roles, particularly within the HR sphere over the last sort of month or two, start to appear, and as more as more companies get back to building their teams, there is going to be a scrabble for really good talent acquisition people. There is no two ways about it. And as that happens, also the agencies will start to build back their levels of confidence. And so again, they will be looking to recruit more talent acquisition people. So there is a light at the end of the tunnel. I genuinely feel that. But I also think this is an opportunity for people to look at whether or not they skill themselves in different sectors and maybe broaden their horizons. And I think this is going to give the opportunity for people to try different things. So if you've always been in, for example, finance recruitment, maybe this is an opportunity now to look at operations or tech recruitment. If you've always been in tech recruitment, maybe it's an opportunity to look at pharmaceutical recruitment. All that kind of, opportunity is going to exist. And, I've always maintained this, that a very, very good talent acquisition person can fit themselves into any organization. All they need to do is just learn about that industry. But recruiting good people is similar no matter what industry you're in. There is always an ability for a very good recruiter to be able to move across industries and across sectors. And I think that's important, more so now than ever, that people still have that belief in themselves, that they can do that, and look for those opportunities where possible to retrain, even if that's sort of doing some volunteer work or working alongside other companies' talent acquisition teams to allow them to give themselves a bit of an opportunity to upskill and learn new things. And I think that's never a bad thing. So whilst I appreciate it's very doom and gloom in the market at the moment, I'm quietly optimistic on it. So fingers crossed.
Perfect. Thanks, Martin. So let's step away from COVID-19, and inevitably we'll come back to it because we kind of have to, but we will do in a bit. But if we step away from that for a minute, and Martin, the other day when we were having a chat, we were talking about diversity and inclusion into our hiring process, and D&I has been a big topic of our webinar series. We've had a couple purely on that, embedding it into your business. We've talked about gender bias. We're going to be doing one on women in technology specifically in a few weeks as well. But if we talk about the hiring process, how do we embed D&I into that and steer away from things like unconscious bias?
Yeah, great question. Wow. I mean, look, 2020 has changed so many things, right? We couldn't have imagined this back in January. And obviously diversity and inclusion has been a huge, has come to the real fore, since obviously Black Lives Matter, for example. I think it was always important before, of course it was, but even more so now. It's been ramped up a notch. And I think, look, it's a really interesting question for talent acquisition people, because I always find that they need to lead the process, but they're also caught within a process. In as much as you can't just tackle diversity and inclusion in one go. It's just an immense subject to try and look at. And so we need to step back and realize as individuals that this is a long-term process. So, in order to embed a true D&I into your hiring process is not something you can do overnight. It's something that can take weeks, months, and years to build up over time. And it needs an inordinate amount of work, not just from the talent acquisition team, but also from the wider HR team, from hiring managers, and then from leadership within a business as well, in order to achieve what you want to achieve. There are certainly some ways of helping to build that out. And, I always think by stepping back and looking at the start of the process, so by working very closely with the hiring managers, understanding exactly what qualities and technical ability you want to see in a candidate before you even set off on the hiring process, is a key part to starting to embed diversity and inclusion. There are certainly ways and methods that you can use to neutralize job descriptions so that they are gender neutral and they appeal to everybody and not just one gender. And there's certainly software out there that can help you do it. And there's certainly individuals out in the marketplace that can help do that too. That's important. And then as you go through the process, it's about trying to neutralize as much as possible so that people are judging individuals on their technical skills, not on how they look or what their background might be. And ways of doing that, for example, at Smart, with our technical tests, we try wherever possible, and it isn't always possible to do this, but wherever it is, whenever we put technical tests through to be marked by our engineering team, they go through anonymized. So, people don't know who submitted the test or what their background is at all. They literally just see the technical test. And that allows them to mark it purely on its technical merit. And so that helps. Having interview panels rather than just one person interviewing is also another great way to be able to include diversity and inclusion, sort of knock out that unconscious bias, because you've then got 4 or 5 people making the hiring decision and not just one person. And then probably what I would say finally on this is to ask for help and work. There are some fantastic organizations out there that can help you work on your diversity and inclusion. So you don't need to hire specifically a diversity and inclusion officer, for example. You can work with organizations that will give you some really good advice on how to reach candidate pools that might be in an ethnic minority or might be of a certain gender that you want to reach out to, and to work with them and use the expertise that's out in the marketplace, I think is super important. And that's a starting point, but it is a long journey. It's definitely a marathon, not a sprint.
Absolutely. Thanks, Martin. And Jason, what do you think about the D&I, and what's the best way to embed it in, or what do 11FS do in terms of embedding it into their hiring process?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what Martin says is exactly what I would say, to be honest, and I think he's spot on. I think, we've if we were looking at kind of the top of funnel side of things initially, we've at 11FS always tried to write gender neutral job descriptions and where possible steer away from the traditional kind of shopping list of job descriptions, 10 bullet points, you must have this. I think there's tons of stats and research out there that suggests that men apply for jobs that perhaps they think they can only do a much smaller percentage of, and women tend to really only apply for jobs when they see that they can do 70% plus of the kind of roles and responsibilities. So where possible, we try to make the role and responsibilities descriptive rather than a shopping list. So I think little things like that, as Martin says, making it as neutral as possible is really important. But we try to place quite a lot of emphasis, not just on the top of funnel. So we're super transparent. We share every quarter how many people are entering our funnel, and then break it down by gender and race initially. But we want to place a lot of focus on the kind of inclusion side of things, and also I think a word that gets a little forgotten is opportunity. So that the big problem with the whole diversity and inclusion movement is the lack of opportunity that underrepresented groups get. So where possible, we want to make the interview processes as unbiased as possible. So little things like ensuring that the questions that candidates get asked for the same role are the same, and that people are judged and our hiring managers use the same metrics for every single candidate. So there isn't too much space for personal views to kind of come into place on, as Martin says, how someone looks or the clothes they're wearing or the color of their hair or if they have tattoos. So, I think it's important that we're judging people on the things that really matter. But that diverse interview panel is really, really important at 11FS as well. So it's rare that people will go through a process and even meet 3 people. We try to get as many people involved as possible, and typically at that kind of slightly more difficult middle part where we're testing people's technical capabilities, we want people from other tribes or cohorts within the business to sit in on those interviews as well. So it's not just engineers judging engineers. We'll have a product manager or a UX designer come in and really make sure that this person fits from kind of or adds to our culture and is overall a kind of a good human being. So they're the real things that we focus on. And as I say, creating that opportunity is really, really important to us, because we don't want to just focus on that top of funnel and the stats to report on. I think it's about ensuring that funnel carries through in the similar kind of ratios to enable more candidates to get more opportunities to speak to more of our people. They might not be right for a role right now, but at least they have entered that process and hopefully got a little bit further than they may have done, and then are able to come back to us in the future as well. So I think that inclusive and opportunity part is just as important as the kind of general diversity piece as well.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jason. And I think over the last few years, there's been a real emergence of video platforms for hiring process. Where do these fit in now? Do you think there's a place for them or not?
I personally haven't used them lots in the past, to be honest. I think that there was a real emergence 3 or 4 years ago, and we 11FS and previous companies, we received lots of kind of video CVs and video introductions. I guess the worry that I have with it is that there is a space for bias. Everyone has unconscious bias. It's human nature, and I think we have to work hard to educate people on privilege and bias. And the worry I have sometimes with video interviewing and video introductions and CVs is that it does create biases in some form sometimes. So I'm perhaps slightly more traditional and like a good old-fashioned telephone interview and CV. I'm sure it certainly has its merits, but really it's not something that I've used a lot previously and currently, really.
What about you, Martin? Is there a place for the video platforms or not?
Yeah, I'm going to come heavily down on the side of Jason here, which probably says a little bit about how people view them. I think when the video kind of platform explosion started to happen, it came alongside the same as sort of how AI might play a future in talent acquisition in the longer term, and I think it was a little bit geared around companies maybe not needing so many talent acquisition people, and actually they could do it all through a video platform. Actually, I totally agree with Jason. I think that just encourages more bias, because you are now sat judging somebody by how they perform on a video interview, whether that's 30 seconds or whether that's 3 minutes or whether it's 10 minutes long, and that's going to create bias. I've got no two ways about it. But I also think it's unfair on the candidate. I think interviewing has to be a two-way street, right? So it's not just about us as a business interviewing candidates and saying, okay, you're right for us. It's also about candidates getting to know the business and saying, okay, I think this company is right for me. And they don't get that opportunity if you're going to judge them on a video interview, or a video pre-recorded video interview, for example. I would much rather have a Google Meet or a conversation with somebody, and allow them to ask questions that they want to ask, and allow them to, to add the extra detail in that they can't always put on a CV. As we all know, you try and keep sort of CVs relatively short, so you can't put everything that you've experienced and everything that you've done always on the CV. So it's important that we give candidates that opportunity, and I think they don't get that if you're just going to judge them on 2 or 3 questions that you might ask at a video interview. So yeah, for me, I'm much more in favor of having the traditional talent acquisition team rather than a video platform.
Makes sense. Absolutely. Okay. So just changing track to a little bit again. So I've got two questions around candidate experience, and one just a very, I suppose, basic one. But Martin, for you, what does a good candidate experience look like? What experience are you happy with the candidate has with Smart Pension, whether they get the job or not? What's it look like for you?
Yeah, the way we always try to approach it at Smart is we want people to walk away, even if they're unsuccessful. And we want them to go and go, oh, you know what, I really love that company, and I'm going to try again in 12 months, or I'm going to try again in 2 years. I'm going to, I really want to go and work for Smart. And I think that comes down to just, I say just, but I think it comes down to a little bit of humanity, right? When you're talking with candidates and actually understanding that they're in a process, and that you need to continually give them feedback throughout the way. So even if you receive a CV and it's not right, it's super important that you go back to that candidate and say, thanks, we've had your CV, however, it's not right, or it's not what we're looking for at this stage, but we'll happily hold on to your details, etc. Or have you looked at these other roles on our site? And I think that's the first part. And then as candidates start to move through the process, I think your need to actually give them substantial feedback becomes greater the further down the process they get. So after a phone screen, or after a first or second stage interview, is when really you need to be picking up the phone to candidates and going back and saying, look, you've been unsuccessful, but this is why, and genuinely giving them feedback, or indeed actually asking them if they want feedback, because sometimes candidates are like, okay, that's fine, and they don't really want to listen to feedback. Other times they genuinely do. So it's really about almost tailor making the sort of the feedback and the candidate experience per candidate. Now you have that, but of course I also appreciate that there are jobs where we will advertise, and I'm sure everybody on this call can relate to this, where you advertise, you put a job out there, and all of a sudden you've got 100, 150 CVs in. So you can't obviously sit and write an email to all 150 people and give them individual feedback. But like I said, just even if it's just a templated version, that initial thanks for sending in your CV, thanks for taking the time to apply for us, unfortunately you've been unsuccessful, but we will hold your details, goes a long way. And the amount of emails that I get back from candidates saying thank you for letting me know, I've lost track certainly over the last 6 months of how many times that's happened. People are genuinely, I think, surprised a little bit nowadays, but genuinely happy that we've actually reached back out to them and said thanks for your application. And I think that's super important, and that goes a million miles to making a great candidate experience.
And if you reverse engineer that a little bit, what are the big common no-nos you hear about, or have seen perhaps in businesses you've worked in terms of companies delivering a really poor candidate experience? Anything that stands out to you?
Yeah, it definitely. So yeah, first and foremost is not going back to a candidate, particularly when they've had an interview. I hear horror stories of people that have given up their time and gone for 2 or 3 interviews, or indeed, submitted tests or online assessments, and then just heard nothing back from the company, which is just, yeah, appalling. I mean, that's a major no. I've also heard of, people trying to hide behind, oh, you're just not quite right for this role, rather than actually getting and understanding feedback from the hiring managers and understanding feedback from leadership around why an individual is not right. And so, trying to sort of gloss over what the feedback that they're trying to give to a candidate, and that inevitably ends up in trouble. So I think those are probably the 2 biggest no's for me. Yeah, I'll let Jason give his opinion on it, but I think they're the 2 biggest ones for me.
So Jason, good and the bad. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think if we're looking at it from, communication really, as Martin says, goes through both of those, both good and bad. I think that the real big, the thing that kind of gets forgotten during an interview process is that obviously every candidate is trying to give the absolute best impression, but there's areas that everyone has that aren't as strong as others. And what we try to take from that during the process at 11FS is that, yeah, look, there's 10 things here that you're great at. There's 1 or 2 things that you're not so strong at. And then we try and take that interview feedback and work it into initial development plans as well. So, if it's, let's say, presentation skills, not everyone is great at presenting. That's there's no shame in that. So I think it's being able to take that feedback and then tell candidates, hopefully when we're at offer stage or as we're going through that contract negotiation, look, this was all great, but actually here's some areas that we want to help you improve on as soon as you get in the door. And I think it's little things like that kind of get forgotten at the real the gritty end of an interview process, when people are now starting to think about salaries and packages and start dates. Actually, I think it's still really, really important to talk about development and what someone's career looks like, rather than the immediately obvious stuff as well. And as Martin says, that feedback touch point in between every single call is really, really important. I think we want to create environments for candidates where they feel comfortable asking questions of us as well. So whether that be before, during, after interviews, or whether it's a week later, why is my feedback this, or what does a specific person think of me or my skills? I think the real important thing is creating comfort levels so that people are able to genuinely bring themselves properly to an interview and not be, there's obviously nerves and stress, but to be able to be as free of those issues as possible, and to be able to be as natural and demonstrate their true personality. So that kind of comfort creation is really important. And then on the bad side of things, I don't think it will take people long to scroll through LinkedIn to see that communication is the big one, right? There's nothing worse than going through, even if it's just one interview or whether it's 5 or 6, getting to that stage where you've committed a lot of your time and quite often time when you should be working, to go to interviews, to speak to people, to complete tasks, and then to kind of get that ghosted effect right at the end is unpleasant in a number of ways, not just from I want to know the answer, but also it doesn't do wonders for people's well-being and mental health as well. So I think things like that are really, really straightforward. As Martin says, it can literally be a couple of minutes of a recruiter or talent acquisition specialist's day, and those messages do really, really go a long way. So I think communication is key to both good and bad processes.
And we were talking about this the other day. So in January, for every job advert that went out there was 11 people out there who would be applying to jobs. Fast forward to September, there's now 21 people for every advert. So there's an awful lot more people looking for jobs, not necessarily all out of work, but there's a lot of people looking for work. So if you look at the role of talent acquisition, so we've got in terms of candidate experience, so as Martin said, we can have templates for everyone applies to the job. But how does talent acquisition manage their time? Because they're going to need to speak to more people perhaps. So how do you manage that and while still giving that, authentic candidate experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of prioritization and organization has always been something that I've tried to stress upon myself, but then with people that I work with as well. So, I think there's really, really simple ways of managing your time in things like this. I know that I set aside 2 hours a week to do things like this. So I have a slot 10 until 11 on a Friday morning and 3 until 4 or 4 until 5 on a Tuesday or Wednesday, to make sure that I'm, as a very worst case scenario, I'm going back through and looking at the interviews and calls that I've done over the previous week to make sure that I'm going back to all of those candidates, but then also taking the time to properly review CVs as well. So, I think we said this when we were talking the other day, that empathy and empathetic levels of communication need to be higher than they ever have been before, because, as you say, there's double the amount of people nearly that are applying for jobs. So that inevitably means that a job search is harder for people. So as Martin says, that simple message really, really goes a long way. So I think it's really the least that we can do as people that are responsible for these sorts of processes, to spend a little bit more time and be perhaps a little bit more empathetic than we ever realized we needed to be, and have that kind of caring human nature, as you mentioned at the top. So I think, it may well add a little bit more time to our days, but I think in reality, it's something that needs to be done, and you within those numbers, you may well miss someone that actually could be a gem for another position if you're scrolling through things too quickly. So I think it's, prioritization and organization has never been more important than it is right now, and then sprinkle in some empathy on top of that, and hopefully that's the right kind of mix.
And Martin, do you think that do you think that in a market whereby if you put out an advert now, you could easily get, for instance, we've got a client who put out an advert for a product manager and they got 500 responses to go through. So is it perhaps, Martin, that maybe an advert isn't as an effective tool these days, because actually you might be better off, I don't know, going to LinkedIn or going straight to, I suppose, not headhunting, but looking for people on the board rather than actually using an advert? What do you think?
Yeah, great question. I think first and foremost, I think it really depends on the size of your talent acquisition team as well. Right. I think when we were talking the other week, I said we recently put out an advert for a PA, and we had 170 applications in 4 hours. So I think this comes back to Jason's point a little bit around prioritizing. And making sure that as a team we're on top of what we're advertising, where it's advertised, and for how long it's advertised. So with that role in particular, for example, we had it out for 4 hours and we literally took it off every platform possible, so that we stopped the flow of applications into the process, because I think that's important as well. Sometimes you just get to a level where you go, okay, we've got enough applications here, let's go through this first application. You forget that you can always re-advertise a role if the right person isn't within those applications. I think the second thing, when you get that volume of applications, is you can't jump at it all in one go. So to suddenly expect yourself to be able to sit there and go through 170 CVs and give each one the attention that it deserves in one go is pretty much nigh on impossible, right? You need to do it in batches. So give yourself 2 or 3 days, to do that and to go through those CVs, or a week indeed. So long again as you're communicating, you can always go back to the candidates and say, thanks very much, we've received your application, we will come back to you by X date. Then again, effective communication makes a world of difference to the candidate experience. And then you start to go through those, and it could be that, for example, at Smart, what we very often do is that the recruiter might do the first, or talent acquisition person might do the first pass of CVs and maybe take that number from 170 down to maybe 50 or 60 CVs. And then we might ask the hiring manager and the team to come in and go through those CVs and go, okay, right, well, we'll knock it down to this level. And then we go back to the talent acquisition person making the initial phone screen, and then going through the kind of normal sort of questions around sort of salary and location and things like that, and obviously an understanding more of an individual's background. And then we would knock it down further. So there are steps and processes that we follow to ensure that we give everybody a fair opportunity, as Jason rightly mentioned in the previous question, but that we're not putting the pressure on ourselves to go through 170 CVs in 2 hours and make rushed and very harsh decisions, because as Jason rightly said, it might not even be that the candidate is right for that role, but they might be right for another role within the business, and you've just instantly rejected them from a process. So really important that we do that, and that we ensure that we're taking a little bit of pressure off ourselves, like I said, to not do it in 2 hours, spread it out. So long as the communication with the candidate is there, then I think that's definitely a fair process. And I actually think that candidates are a little bit more open to that nowadays as well. They understand that a lot of people are looking for new opportunities, and so if you go back to them and say, look, we'll come back to you within a week, and we're going through CVs at the present time, people are very, very happy with that and understanding of that, for sure.
Perfect. Thanks, Martin. So we've got a few more questions. We're going to start talking about AI in a second. But if we've got 30 people in this audience, if anyone's got any questions, please do let us know, and happy to throw the floor to you. But if we talk about AI, so what do we think the effect of AI will have on talent acquisition over the coming years? And we can look back, we were talking the other day, again, back in the mid 2000s, LinkedIn was the death of recruiters and talent acquisition, absolutely, and that was going to be it. We've talked about video platforms, which of course would, it seemed like quite an interesting innovation a few years ago, and actually now it kind of plays into old-fashioned problems. So perhaps that's not so relevant. But what do we think could affect talent acquisition, maybe for the better? And what might it replace in the jobs we do at the moment?
Yeah, crikey, where to start with AI? This is a subject that's rumbled on for quite a few years now. AI is going to replace the recruiter. It's going to replace talent teams. There'll be no need for teams in the future. I have to be honest, I think that is a long way off, if that is the case. And I mean, a lot of years off. For me personally, talent acquisition plays such a huge part in HR and actually in a business. If you think about a business, the biggest asset a business has is its people. The biggest cost to a business is its people. What makes a business successful is down to the people that work within that business. So, to then kind of give the control of how you're bringing people into the business over to AI, for me, it just doesn't equate, and I don't see how that it really is possible. You need that human interaction, you need that human contact. And I think, as we've discussed a lot already, that's also super important for people that are thinking about joining your business. They don't want to have a conversation with an interactive individual at the moment. They want to have a conversation with a person. They want to talk about things that go on within the business. They want to understand your business. And for me, that's what sets the talent acquisition team apart from AI. Is there a place for AI to help and assist talent acquisitions teams? Definitely, and I can see that certainly happening over the next few years. But I don't think it will replace them. I think they're just too integral to the business and to the success of businesses, if I'm honest.
Thanks, Martin. And Jason, so we're not going to get replaced by AI, but what do you think will it do? What will the impact be?
Yeah, I mean, everything Martin said there is spot on. I think, interacting with chatbots and that sort of stuff, you get frustrated enough just with your banking, for instance, working with chatbots, let alone placing your career and life in some instances in the hands of AI. So I think, as Martin says, there's possibly a place for it when it gets to that developed stage, but that human touch is critical. I think from an AI and broader technology point of view, there's definitely things it can help with. I think the automation of people's time. So obviously we're talking about at the moment, and I guess possibly for the foreseeable future, there's huge amounts of people that are looking for jobs, as you say, double applying. So the strain on people's times, as Martin said, is harder than ever. So I think there's definitely space for technology, AI, whatever it is, to help automate some of a recruiter or talent acquisition person's time. Whether that be simple things like arranging interviews or collecting CVs en masse, whatever it may well be. I think there's definitely some room for some automation and generally making people's lives easier. There's nothing really that kind of stands out from how do we grade people or how is it that we judge that someone is great. I haven't really seen anything that comes anywhere near to someone that just has a really good eye for talent. I've not seen that yet. And as you say, there's been lots of different kind of comings of things that are going to replace humans. LinkedIn, job boards, Broadbean back in the day, and things like that have never really quite done it, because you do need that human touch. People ultimately still want to talk to another person at the end of the day, especially for things like this. So if it gets a lot more intelligent, then maybe. But I think its role right now and for the foreseeable is to help automate and speed up processes rather than replace people entirely.
Fingers crossed. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and what about Jason? What about the roles, HR, talent, and people? Have those roles and departments, have they become more blurred? Could we see it becoming more emergence of those functions as we move forward? Do you think into the coming years?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly at 11FS we've over the last 6 months seen a blurring of some of those roles. I think there will always be always be space for specialists. Not everyone wants to be a generalist essentially, and I've worked with plenty of amazing recruiters who are amazingly strong at the sourcing side of things, and that's really all they want to do. So I think there'll always be space for specialists, but I think now more than ever, as Martin said at the top, being able to retrain and learn new things now is a great opportunity to do that, because companies, for obvious reasons, are watching the pennies at the moment. So if someone's able to start to pick up employee relations or L&D or lead on D&I programs, I think now is the time to do that. So naturally, I think the lines will start to blur, especially at the slightly more senior end of things. So I think once you're kind of a senior recruiter or senior TA kind of upwards, that there's definitely more opportunity just by nature of the conversations that you have. Your client groups and stakeholder groups internally will hopefully trust you with people issues and L&D issues, and I think those lines will blur. We quite often see at 11FS and previously at BCG, we saw that the talent teams were quite often the first people that our client groups came to for HR and people issues, whether it was performance or someone was looking to leave or there was other issues of a more serious nature. It's quite often that the talent teams were the first port of call. So I think if you're able to build those really trusting relationships, then and you're interested in that blur of roles, then absolutely there's opportunity to do it now, probably more than there ever has been, really.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jason. What do you think, Martin?
Yeah, I think it's important actually that those lines do become a bit blurred as we go forward. As 2020 has probably taught a lot of people, just having one area of specialism, makes it difficult for you to kind of change and go with an ever shifting marketplace. And certainly it's smart. What I would say about the team there, other than they're amazing, and I have to say that because there are one or two members of my team on the call, so I'm going to get that one straight out there. But look, what we try and do is we ensure that everybody has an understanding of each other's roles. That's really important. And if they want to cross the lines and look at other areas of HR, they're more than welcome to do that. As Jason rightly says, there is definitely a space for specialists, and not everybody wants to recruit all day, every day, and not everybody wants to deal with employee relations cases all day, every day, and not everybody wants to train people all day, every day. We totally understand that. But actually having an understanding of each other's roles and understanding what it might look like to be sitting in an employee relations case, or what it might look like to recruit individuals, for example, I think really helps build not only a tighter knit team and a closer team, but it also gives us a much better understanding to be able to then go and recruit the right talent in the first place. So, a lot of my recruitment team, for example, have been working on benefits packages alongside the HR team, because the recruiters are getting firsthand feedback from candidates around salaries, benefits, or what else is out there in the marketplace when their candidates are talking to other companies, for example. And that's hugely important information that if you don't have that kind of blurring of lines, it doesn't get through to the HR team very often. So that's super important. At the same token, it's important that the HR team are also active in recruitment, because we go through peaks and troughs like most businesses, where our key focus, for example, might be hiring. And I might need the team to jump on, to hiring and pick up roles and work on that. And that's super important. And then maybe there's a HR project that comes along 6 months later where recruitment's a little bit quieter. And I might say to the recruitment team, right, we need you to help out on this HR project and work with us on this. So I think that's really important. And also, I think it makes it a nicer environment if people can learn new things and develop and build their own capability. Then I think that's only ever going to be a good thing. And I certainly think as we go forward, and again after COVID and as we move forward, you get the feeling that we are now morphing much more into sort of teams rather than specific areas of specialism all the time. So if I look back sort of 5 years ago, it was very, very often the case that you had a recruitment team, a training and development team, a HR team, and they rarely spoke to one another. They were almost classed as separate individuals or individual teams, whereas actually now I find them much more classed under the umbrella of HR or talent, however you want to word that, and there is much more cross-functional purpose and much more cross-functional engagement between those teams, which like I said, I think is very, very important, because it allows the flow of information much better, and it allows people to have a much broader perspective of HR and what that encompasses. So yeah, I think it's a good thing.
Perfect. Thanks, Martin. So we've got one or two more questions for the speakers. So if you do have any questions to the audience, now is the time, or forever hold your peace. So Martin, let's go straight back to you. So if we I suppose we've got two questions for each of you. The first is kind of that one thing type question. So if you are looking to get the most out of your talent function and its people moving into 2021 and onwards, what is the one thing you'd recommend a business needs to do?
Yeah, I think it comes back to what I've just said. I think cross-train them and develop them and allow them to have that overview of everything that goes on within HR, because you will be amazed at what amazing ideas that a recruitment team can add into a wider HR process. So for me, cross-training development, that's the one thing.
And what would you say, I suppose the one thing in terms of if you are a talent acquisition professional, what was the one thing you would suggest to them? I suppose the obvious answer is, well, make sure you get cross-trained. But I suppose, is there anything specific, I think, that you think that in terms of skill-wise, the talent acquisition of today need to make sure they've got to survive and evolve and thrive?
Yeah, I think it's to be open-minded, and to really, like I said, I think when we were talking about diversity, is to look at the plethora of organizations out there that can really help talent acquisition people, widen the funnel when you're looking for candidates, that can give you advice on diversity and inclusion, for example, that can, help you look outside the box and think outside the box. I think very often as talent acquisition, individuals, and I wholeheartedly include myself in this, we can sometimes get a bit blinkered when we've been in a company for a while, and we kind of get stuck in the day to day. And it's really important to kind of step back, have a look, celebrate what you do incredibly well. I think that's also important. People very often can, it's particularly in talent acquisition, right? If they can get beaten up a little bit, people are very much a case of, well, why aren't we hiring these roles, and what's going wrong, and why aren't you doing this, and why aren't you doing that? So I think celebrating the success is a big part of it. But then, like I said, use organizations that are out there to help you, because there is, just looking at the last sort of 2 or 3 years, there are far more opportunities to engage with external companies to help you with that, other than just recruitment agencies. And I think they're underutilized at the moment. So yeah, that's what I would say, other than cross-train.
Perfect. Thanks, Martin. And Jason, so same question to you. So what one piece of advice would you give a business looking to make sure they're utilizing their talent team in the most effective way? And then the same question in terms of an individual, what is the one thing they need to make sure they're skilled up in? And I'm afraid you can't use the same answers as Martin, so it's quite something different.
No, fair enough. So I think the big thing for me is that businesses continue to trust their talent acquisition teams. I think it's really easy to assume that lots of people are looking for work, so we should fill our jobs much quicker and more cheaply, and do things in a different way to how we've always done them. So I think it's crucial that businesses continue to trust their talent acquisition teams, and then trust the processes that they've put in place. So don't take shortcuts just to get something done quickly, has always been the case, but I think especially now, you need to make sure that everyone sticks to the right kind of processes, recruiters, hiring managers, and then exec teams as well. It's really, really important that trust in the process and the people stays. Just because the job market is kind of turned on its head, it doesn't mean that you should start to act in a slightly different way, or be any less professional. So I think that's really, really important. And I think if we're talking about individual skills, I think the ability to, it kind of goes back to communication, but that ability to influence, I think, is really, really important. We've lost the ability, and something we took for granted, being able to walk up to our colleague's desk, or stop by them in the kitchen, or grab a coffee, or go for lunch. So being able to have those serendipitous conversations that you took for granted before, you now have to kind of arrange a time, or speak over Zoom, or Slack messages, or whatever it is. So I think being able to get your message across in the same way as you did when you were face to face is really, really important. So working on stakeholder management and influencing skills will be more crucial than they kind of ever have been, I think.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jason. Well, look, I think that's a good way to end and to wrap up. So thanks so much to our speakers. Jason, if anyone wanted to kind of pick your brain or grab some advice, what's the best way for people to reach you?
Best way is probably on LinkedIn. So Jason Waterman, Talent Director at 11FS. Feel free to drop me a connection invite, or send me a message.
Fantastic. And Martin, is it same with you?
Yeah, exactly the same as me. So it's Martin Warner, Director of Talent for Smart. And likewise, you can find me on LinkedIn. So please feel free to do that. Happy to make connections, etc.
Perfect. All right. Fantastic. Well, look, thanks so much to both of you for spending an hour with us, and thanks to the audience. We stay strong, kind of around the 30 mark throughout this hour. So thanks so much for being a part of this. Next week, we are going to be talking culture and tech, how tech can accelerate culture change in a hybrid workplace. We're going to be joined by a director of customer success from Microsoft, a lady called Helen Wilson. And we've had a lot of interest in that. So please do be a part of it. But apart from that, I hope everyone has a good end to the week, a good weekend. And thanks to the speakers again. I'll see you all next week. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Paul. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Take care.
Cheers. Bye-bye.